Some moments arrive quietly and leave you permanently changed. You are going about your day, your routine, your carefully constructed version of normal, and then something happens, something small, something unexpected, and the entire lens through which you see the world shifts. This is one of those stories. Pay close attention, because this one will stay with you long after it ends. His name was Richard Calloway, and he was the kind of man who filled every room he entered. Not because he was warm or magnetic or particularly funny, but because he was rich. Extraordinarily, visibly, undeniably rich. The kind of rich that comes with a private driver and a reserved table and a last name that opens doors before you even knock. At 52 years old, Richard had built a commercial real estate empire across 7 states. He had 3 homes, 2 boats, and one philosophy that he had carried his entire adult life, that the world was divided into people who mattered and people who did not, and that money was the only reliable way to tell the difference. He was not cruel in the way villains are cruel in movies. He never raised his voice. He never threatened anyone. He simply treated certain people as though they were invisible, and he did it with such practiced ease that it never even registered to him as a choice. Waitstaff, cleaning crews, parking attendants, security guards, these were background furniture to Richard Calloway. Functional, necessary, but not worth his real attention. That worldview had never been seriously challenged, not once in 52 years. Until a Tuesday afternoon in October in the lobby of his own office building in downtown Chicago. Richard had just come out of a board meeting that had gone exactly the way he wanted. A major acquisition had been approved, a competitor had been outmaneuvered, and everything was proceeding according to his design. He was in the elevator, descending to the lobby, scrolling through emails on his phone, when the doors opened. He walked out without looking up, the way powerful people do when they are confident the world will move around them. He nearly walked into her. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, wearing a building maintenance uniform and pushing a large janitorial cart loaded with cleaning supplies. She stopped the cart just in time. A single bottle of glass cleaner toppled off the top shelf and hit the polished marble floor with a loud plastic crack. Not broken, just loud, but loud enough to make the few people in the lobby glance over. Richard looked up from his phone. He looked at the girl. He looked at the bottle on the floor, and then something switched on inside him, some deeply embedded reflex born from years of believing his time was more valuable than anyone else's, and he spoke. He spoke in Arabic. Richard had learned Arabic years ago during a period of heavy business dealings in the Gulf region. He was fluent, sharp, precise, and in that moment, standing in his own lobby, looking at this young maintenance worker with her cart and her fallen bottle, he used that fluency not as a bridge, but as a weapon. He said in perfect Arabic, smoothly and quietly, just loud enough for a nearby colleague to hear and smirk, that some people were simply born to clean up messes, and that the floor she was mopping would always be the ceiling of her ambition. It was cruel, it was calculated, and he said it with the complete confidence of a man who was absolutely certain she had no idea what he had just said. He was wrong. The girl straightened up slowly. She picked up the bottle from the floor and placed it back on the cart with quiet, unhurried care. Then she looked at Richard Calloway directly, not nervously, not with anger, not with the apologetic deflection he was used to from people in her position. She looked at him the way someone looks at another person when they have decided to tell them an important truth. And then she replied, in Arabic, flawless, native Levantine Arabic, the kind spoken in Syria and Lebanon, the kind that carries centuries of poetry and civilization in its syllables. She said, calmly, without raising her voice even slightly, that a man who uses a language to humiliate someone he believes cannot understand him is not a powerful man, he is a frightened one, and that the floor she mopped every day was cleaner than the character of the person standing on it. The lobby went absolutely still. Richard Calloway stood frozen. His colleague beside him had stopped smirking. Two people near the reception desk had turned around completely. Even the security guard at the entrance had straightened up from his usual lean. Richard stared at her, his mouth opened slightly and then closed. Something moved across his face that had not been there in a very long time, something that looked unmistakably like shame. The girl did not wait for his response. She adjusted the strap on her cart, gave him one final steady look, and pushed it forward down the corridor, her shoes making soft sounds on the marble he had just been so proud of. His name was not cleared that day. His reputation was not ruined. No dramatic firing happened and no viral video circulated. This is not that kind of story. This is the kind that happens quietly and changes everything anyway. Richard went home that evening and could not eat. He sat in his kitchen, the enormous designer kitchen of his Lincoln Park home, with a glass of water he barely touched, and he kept hearing her voice, not with anger, with clarity, with the kind of quiet certainty that made his own words, replayed in his memory, sound like exactly what they were: small, mean, unworthy of a man who called himself successful. He asked his assistant the next morning to find out who she was. Her name was Nadia Khalil. She was 20 years old. She had come to the United States from Lebanon at 16 with her mother and younger brother after her father passed away. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Nadia had won a partial academic scholarship to the University of Illinois at Chicago, where she was studying civil engineering. She worked the building maintenance job 3 mornings a week before her afternoon classes to help cover rent. She was carrying a 3.8 GPA. She spoke 4 languages: Arabic, French, English, and conversational Spanish. She had been published once, at 19, in a regional academic journal on sustainable urban infrastructure. Richard read the report his assistant compiled and sat with it for a long time. He had looked at this girl and seen a ceiling. She had already built herself a sky. He did something then that did not come naturally to him. He asked his assistant to arrange a meeting. Not a formal one, not a recruitment pitch, just a conversation. He expected Nadia to refuse. He would not have blamed her. But she agreed with one condition: that it happened in the building lobby, on her break, at a time she chose. Richard agreed without hesitation. They met on a Thursday at noon. She brought her own coffee. She sat across from him with the same composure she had carried the week before, and she listened as Richard Calloway, a man who had spent 52 years being listened to, stumbled through the least polished speech of his entire career. He apologized, not efficiently, not corporately, not with the practiced grace of a man used to managing optics. He apologized badly and honestly, the way people do when they are genuinely ashamed and have not done it enough to be good at it yet. Nadia listened to all of it. She did not make it easy for him, and she did not make it hard. She simply received it with the same quiet dignity she seemed to carry everywhere. When he finished, she said she accepted his apology, not because what he did was acceptable, but because carrying resentment toward people like him would cost her energy she had already decided to spend on better things. Then she stood up, picked up her coffee, and said one more thing before she left. She told him that the most dangerous kind of ignorance was not the kind that came from lack of education. It was the kind that came from too much unchallenged comfort. She said she hoped his discomfort lasted long enough to be useful. Then she walked back to her cart and finished her shift. Richard Calloway established a scholarship fund 4 months later, not quietly, not for publicity, but because Nadia's words had lodged somewhere deep in his thinking and refused to leave. The fund was specifically for first-generation immigrant students pursuing degrees in engineering and infrastructure. He named it not after himself, but after his own father, a man who had arrived in this country with $40 in a suitcase and built something from nothing. A story Richard had spent decades telling at galas and then quietly forgetting to actually live by. Nadia received a full scholarship upgrade in her junior year. She did not know it came from him until the letter arrived. She called his office once to acknowledge it. His assistant said he was unavailable. He was, in fact, sitting right there. He told the assistant he would call back. He never did. Some things he had finally learned did not need to circle back to him. Nadia Khalil graduated with honors 2 years later. She now works for a sustainable urban development firm in Chicago. She still speaks 4 languages. She added a 5th. Richard Calloway still fills every room he enters. But something is different now. He looks up from his phone in elevators. He makes eye contact with the people who clean his lobbies and park his cars and take his orders. He does not always say the right thing. He is not transformed into a saint, but he is changed, permanently, quietly, irreversibly changed by a 20-year-old girl with a janitorial cart who refused to be invisible. Here is the truth this story is asking you to hold. Arrogance is just fear wearing expensive clothes. Every person who looks past another human being is not seeing clearly. They are protecting themselves from the discomfort of recognizing that worth has nothing to do with wealth, that dignity belongs to everyone, and that the person mopping your floor might be building the city you will one day need them to design. Nadia did not change Richard Calloway by being impressive. She changed him by simply refusing to be less than she was, in his presence or anyone else's. You do not have to shrink for anyone, not for their comfort, their insecurity, or their arrogance. You carry what you carry, your language, your story, your quiet and undefeatable self, and you place it in front of the world without apology. That is enough. That has always been enough. If this story moved something inside you, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone else's quiet dignity, then this channel is exactly where you belong. Hit the like button right now because it tells us this kind of storytelling matters to you. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that they are not invisible, because sometimes people forget, and a single story is enough to remind them. Subscribe to Uscape One, because every single week we are here with a new story, a new truth, a new reminder that the most powerful thing in any room is not always the richest person in it. Your next story is already waiting. We will see you there.